everybody, Mrs. Dumas here along with Mr. Breen, and today we're going to be talking about DBQ feedback. In the next couple of days, you'll be getting back your French Revolution DBQ, and you're going to see comments on your paper, you're going to see specific words, and we want to explain what those mean so you have a better understanding of what you did well on your DBQ and what you need to work on. So, let's get started. So you might have a sample paragraph that looks like this. And as we said, you're going to see some boxes like this. You're going to see some words and some pluses or minuses. So let's take a look at what those mean. When you see a box like this, it just means we're providing commentary for you. You may have used the wrong word, or you may have used an awesome word. So these boxes aren't directly tied to a specific rubric point. That's more just a stylistic box to help you make better stylistic choices in your DBQ. When you start seeing words like this, these words are directly tied to actual points in the DBQ. So CNTX, that stands for context. And by context, you'll see either a little plus or a minus by it. If you have a plus, that means that your context was solid, it totally worked with your argument, you would earn the point for it. If you see a minus, that means that we saw that you attempted context, but it doesn't quite work. And then we should be giving you comments on the side as to why it doesn't work. For this context, the student started off super strong. Great hook, talks about losing a bunch of wars, helped the Americans win the American Revolution. France was tired. Great start. But then what we see is this student talk a lot about the third estate, which is totally true and totally legit. But because one of his arguments in the DBQ was the treatment of the third estate, he probably wants to save this for that paragraph on the third estate. So whatever arguments you're making in your paper, don't use that information in your historical context. Make it something completely different. And so for this student, even though he attempted it, it wasn't quite there because it related too much to the argument he's making in his paper, but he's close. Now, down here, you see the word thesis plus. So again, obviously, thesis means thesis. And because it has a plus by it, this student earned the credit for the thesis. It was a really solid thesis. 2 causes of the French Revolution. Cause number 1, government slowly running out of money. Cause number 2, treatment of the third estate. Those are 2 very specific arguments that this student is going to make in the paper. They're historically defensible, which means they're accurate. So this student earns the point for thesis. So when you go to look at your intro paragraph, look at the comments that we make in your paper, look for the pluses or minuses, and that should tell you what you earn credit for and what you don't earn credit for. Let's move on to a body paragraph. So in this body paragraph, once again, you see some text boxes that will be commentary, but you also see things such as this. When you see an EV1, that means this counts towards the evidence number 1 point. And the evidence number 1 basically means if you use a piece of evidence from a document that just even relates to the topic, you have a possibility of earning the evidence 1 point. When you see the EV2, that means that your evidence actually does a good job supporting the argument that you're trying to make. And so in order to get evidence 1 point and evidence 2 point, you have to have 3 EV1s in your paper. That gets you 1 point. If you see 3 EV2s, that means you get another point. Now, I want to explain with the sample below this down here, the difference between EV1 and EV2. So this student's argument that another cause of the French Revolution was the taxation and overall treatment of the third estate. When you come down here, we're talking about document 3. The living conditions of the current monarchy in France were terrible for the third class. That doesn't quite make sense, so we'd probably want to take monarchy out. They were forced to pay taxes even though they were the most poor. They did not have access to good food, and they still had to tend to their animals and farm. That evidence by itself, even though it relates to bad conditions, it doesn't really show that treatment by King Louis XVI of the third estate was bad and it was leading to revolution. So that's why this piece of evidence doesn't get credit for EV2, because it doesn't really support what the argument's saying. For it to support, we actually had to see bad treatment by King Louis XVI in the evidence, or excessive taxation in the evidence. And we don't see that here, and there's no explanation really down here to show that. So that's why that didn't get the EV2 point. Now up here, when the evidence is presented, it is seen that the first and second estates are trampling the third estate. That evidence alone does not support taxation, right? That doesn't show taxation at all. But because the student goes on to explain that the first and second estates were ganging up on the third estates member and using them to facilitate their growth, and King Louis only taxed them, that's where we get the explanation that makes this evidence really do a good job supporting that topic sentence. So that's the difference between EV1 and EV2, and hopefully that makes sense. So now finally, let's move on to sourcing. So this student definitely attempts sourcing and lets me know its purpose. You do not need to tell me. I mean, you can, it totally works if you want to, but you don't need to tell me what sourcing it is. I should be able to guess that, but if you want to, that doesn't bother me either. So this student attempts to source document 3 for purpose, and basically says the purpose of this document is to show how terrible life was in France when under the monarchy of King Louis XVI, and to see the perspective of the people in the community. So great explanation of what the purpose is. But the reason this is a sourcing minus is because the student doesn't tell me why that's the purpose or connect it back to the argument. If the argument is one of the reasons that we have revolutionist France is because of poor treatment, yes, this is showing me poor treatment, but the sourcing just says, hey, this is the purpose, but he doesn't tell me why. Why did the author want to record this? And it's not just to see the perspective of the community. What was the author trying to accomplish by giving the perspective of the community? It could be this guy. I think this guy was English, and he might have been concerned that this could happen in England as well. And so maybe he was trying to show the English government or the English people, hey, if we do the same thing, this revolution is going to come to us as well. Or maybe because he's English, right, and he hates the French, that this was a chance to say, oh, look how the French suck at treating their people, ha, 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 ha. So either one of those would work. Just make sure when you do sourcing, it's not just the what, it's also the why. Okay, so this student is absolutely on the right track with sourcing. That statement just needs to connect back to the argument a little bit more. So hopefully this feedback has helped you, and here is what you need to do next. Number 1, you need to go open up your essay on turnitin.com and read the feedback we give you. There's also auditory feedback as well. Seriously, read the feedback. We can't tell you enough how important it is to actually read the feedback. Read it, read it, read it. Once you have read the feedback and you spent 24 hours thinking about your essay, obviously not all 24 in a row, but you've given your time to process your essay and the feedback, we want you to pick one area that you would like to conference with us about. It could be contextualization, it could be evidence, it could be sourcing. You get to pick one area to talk about with us. And then what you're going to do is schedule a time to meet with us during our DBQ office hours. 10-minute sessions only. That's what you get because we have so many kids. And during those 10 minutes, we will focus on that one area and give you more feedback in order to help you improve in that area. So, as always, if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, do not hesitate to ask us. But until next time, we will see you later.